The first of everything that we do, we usually have these canonized in our brains. Do you remember the first time you rode your bike?
I remember my first bike. And so, yes, and it was actually my mom's bike, and it was pink, and it had the banana.
Oh,
the
yes.
banana seat?
Streamers,
Yeah.
little tassels.
And that's the first bike I learned to ride on.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you went swimming?
I remember the first time I swam in the deep end because my grandma just threw me in and said, figure it out.
Wow.
And I did.
And you must have, because here you sit. Yeah.
I'm sure she would have saved me, but tossed me in. And I remember it.
I bet. How old were you?
Oh, I couldn't have been 3 or 4, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I was young.
Oh,
Hopefully
Jason.
she saved some money for therapy too.
Yeah, no
Okay.
kidding.
All right.
No kidding.
I'm a good swimmer.
Yeah.
You are,
Yeah.
because you jumped in the deep end.
Yeah.
Jason Lovins with us today on Don and Steve Plus, and we're thankful you're our plus one. Jason, the first time that you ever told your testimony,
Sure.
do you remember that?
I do. I was in front of a tiny little church in eastern Kentucky. My band had just started. I don't remember the church name. I can't remember the pastor's name, and I can't remember his face. But I vividly remember him coming to me the first time I ever shared my story. And he said, I don't think you understand what God's going to do with your life, but you got to promise me that you'll keep sharing that story everywhere you go, every time you stand on a stage. And I said, yeah, I will. And I did. And I had no idea what that would turn into. But that's the first time I ever shared it.
Wow.
I wish I could remember that, and I just don't. But it's been a long time ago now.
Well, you've shared the story for many, many years, many, many times over. And if you had that kind of reaction the first time you shared that story, obviously there's a powerful story here. So we need to back up a little bit, hear the story. Were there nerves the first time you shared that? And
I don't remember.
Okay. Because it's a big story.
Yeah, but for me, I never had a problem talking about it.
Okay.
But even as a kid, I remember like people would automatically go to like, oh, you poor kid, you must have really had it rough. And even as a kid, I remember trying to process that thinking like, nah, I got it pretty good. My wife would tell you I was very spoiled.
Yeah. Well, we got to tell the story.
I don't know that I agree with that, but she thinks I was. But I remember I had it really good, and I knew that. So it was always kind of, and it was just hard for other people. So I remember eventually lying to people and telling them like, yeah, my dad lives in California, because I was good enough at geography to know that was really far away, and it was just easier, I thought, as a kid to not have to explain it. Because again, it just made everybody else feel bad for me. And I remember thinking like, I got it pretty good.
All right, we got to say what the it is.
Yeah.
What is the it? What is the thing that that pastor said you have to share that? The thing that made everybody really kind of say, "Oh, you poor kid."
Yeah. So immediately the response is typically, "Wow, you must have really had it rough," and I just didn't. And so I tell people like, here's my story is this. My mom at 15 years old, she was raped walking home from the pool one day. Didn't remember it. Months went on. I remember as a kid them telling me that she didn't remember it. And I remember thinking like, how do you not remember something so traumatic? Because I think I understood it was a really bad thing. But I was young when they told me, because I think I was starting to ask like, well, hey, where's my dad?
Yeah.
But my mom didn't remember it. And I've had lots of people tell me that when something so traumatic like that happens, that your mind can block it out as if it never happened. And so my mom just didn't remember. And she had 4 other brothers and sisters. My grandma said, your mom was my good kid. And she said, I just missed it. And so my mom will tell you she was very naive for 15. She didn't understand anything about babies. So she didn't understand what was happening. But finally one day she told my grandma, I'm sick, I need to go to the doctor. And my grandma said, well, she's gained weight. We should take her to the doctor and see what the doctor says. I don't always share this from the stage because it's just so much. But my grandma even told me she went with my mom and enrolled her in like a weight loss program.
Oh, wow.
Because she understood my mom was gaining weight, but she said, I went with her as if like I need to lose some weight. So you think of that, you know?
Yeah.
So my grandma even then just missed it. And so finally my mom said, I'm sick, I need to go to the doctor. And my grandma said, she's gained weight. She keeps gaining weight. We need to figure this out. So they go to the doctor, and she says, the doctor says she's pregnant. And after the initial shock wore off, the best way I've always been able to explain it to people is I had a praying mama who said, we're going to go to church and we're going to pray. Mm-hmm. And that's what they did. And if you have heard her tell the story, she made it sound so simple. And I understand that it couldn't have been that easy, but I tell people my grandma very much understood how big God is, and she believed that he's so big that he wasn't surprised by me. And so for her and her 15-year-old daughter, they had some choices that they had to make. And I'm very thankful that they chose life, and that was the plan. Adoption was the plan, and I believe they started leaning into that, like, okay, what is this going to look like? Mm-hmm. And then when my mom heard my heartbeat, changed everything. And she told my grandma, I want to keep this baby. And I always tell people, I know that my 15-year-old mama had no idea what she was getting into, but my grandma did. And she said, okay, if that's what you want to do, that's what we're going to do. And so my mom had me, turned 16 a couple of months later, and went on about life as normal as life could be.
Mm-hmm. With mama helping.
Always right there,
Always helping. So you both lived, obviously, because she was so young.
So my earliest childhood memory is my mom's high school graduation, and it was on my 3rd birthday.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And so, like I lived with my grandparents, and my mom had a younger brother who's 1 year younger, almost to the day. And my mom got held back in the 1st grade. So I have a graduation picture of my mom and my uncle in their cap and gown with my grandparents and me in a little suit at 3 years old. So everyone thought my mom and my uncle were twins, but they're not. Mm-hmm. And so so my Uncle Greg lived at home as well. Like I remember he's the first person that taught me to tie a shoe.
Yeah.
So that was my home unit, my grandparents, my Uncle Greg, and my mom. So,
wow. That's cool that when your mom said, I want to keep my baby.
Yeah.
Your mama said, yes, we're going to do that. And as you think through what that was like growing up, at a certain point, like you've already alluded to, you look around at other kids who have dads in the picture and you don't.
Yeah.
And so you remember when those questions started to come?
I do. And I couldn't have been very old. But my grandpa was always there, but it was very clear he was my grandpa, and at the time I had 7 other cousins that were all within 2 years of each other. So we were all very close. Yeah. So their mom and dads were always around. And so I was the one that was different, but I vividly remember my grandma setting me up on our kitchen stools and telling me why I didn't have a dad. And I'm sure I did not understand the gravity of how traumatic it was.
Yeah.
But I think I just started asking, so she just told me the truth. And so, my whole life I've had people ask me, like, well, how did they tell you? And what did they tell you? And I just said, well, they just told me the truth.
Yeah.
And that was that, and I'm sure I didn't understand it totally, but it was the answer to why I didn't have a dad, And I just kind of remember thinking like, oh, okay, and went on, And I tell people I was so loved, and so I didn't miss it because I just had it coming from so many places,
And they loved you enough to tell you the truth,
yeah.
Even from an early age, because your brain and all your life experiences would catch up.
Yeah.
You would understand more and more every year,
yeah.
And they would continue just to speak truth to you.
Yeah.
That's a lot of love.
It is. It is.
That's a lot of love. So speaking of first, do you remember the first time you heard a Christian song outside of a hymn of the church? Because I'm sure you love those too. I've listened to your music. It's great.
Thank you.
And I love the hymns that you do. You do such a great job with the Jason Lovins band rendition of the hymns. The very first song that you heard that resonated with you and you went, I want to do Christian music?
So my grandma had a gospel group, and they were a little just gospel group that sang in every little church all around the country.
How many?
In the group?
Yeah.
So there would have been 4 of them.
Okay,
And
cool.
my mom actually played the bass guitar.
Nice.
And I don't always share this, but when my mom's water broke, they were at church singing locally, and my grandma was singing.
Oh, bless.
True story.
Yeah.
My grandma was singing. My mom's water broke. She tapped her on the shoulder, and she was holding a bass guitar. And I have that bass guitar at my house, which is kind of cool.
That's so good.
That is great.
So they were singing in every little church in the country. I mean, up every holler. I mean, somebody was having a revival somewhere every night. So it felt like I was in church every night growing up. So my earliest memories of gospel Christian music is my grandma singing. And the only reason I learned to play the guitar was for my grandma, because I just wanted to play for her. 'Cause she was amazing. She could sing, and she just would capture a room, and just phenomenal. And then, you start to learn about all these like famous, especially like gospel artists. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we grew up on. But kind of the cool moment, really, in the 9th grade, I got invited to the big Baptist church in town, and they had a big youth group. And my little youth group was me and my 4 cousins. True story. And so it was just small.
Yeah.
And I had never heard contemporary Christian music. I didn't know praise and worship music even existed. And so I start going to this church. Their youth group was huge. They would have 200-300 kids show up on Sunday nights. I mean, it was crazy. And I didn't know there were that many other kids like me, And so I'm hearing this praise and worship stuff for the first time. It just rocked my world. And my little town was Canova, West Virginia, right? And it's right across the river from where I live in Ashland, Kentucky now. But Canova, West Virginia, this dude walks in the door one day, my 9th grade year, and surprises us. And everybody's going crazy. I'm the only one in the room that doesn't know who it is. And it's Michael W. Smith. He's from Canova, West Virginia. He's from that church. And I had no idea who he was.
That's funny.
And so that was a game changer for me. Once I figured out, because, I mean, at that time, I still think he's the best of the best. But in that moment, he's
like the godfather of CCM, contemporary Christian music.
Kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And we've since then played with him, and he's been very kind to me over the years. But that's the first moment. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. And then my first Christian concert I went to was Big Tent Revival, and it changed my life. Yeah. Loved that album and their band, and so I was living in these worlds of all the gospel stuff, and then I learned all the CCM stuff and all the worship stuff, and it just kind of, I guess, helped shape what we even do, not even realizing it at the time,
At what point did you realize this is the thing that I want to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always wanted it. I never knew what it looked like. Like when I was a kid, if you had asked me, what are you going to do when you grew up? I would have immediately said, I'm going to be the next Garth Brooks. And I was very serious about that. But you just don't know.
Yeah.
But music was always there. It was always a desire. It was always a passion. But when I got in college, all of a sudden I met these guys. We started this band. And then it really started to just fuel the fire. I was a horrible college student because all I was thinking about was this.
Yeah.
And then we started getting invited to do some camps and different things. And we did Fuge camps. And the first summer I did that, we were in front of just hundreds of kids every week, thousands of kids throughout the whole summer, But in that summer, in that moment is this is it. I know now this is what I'm supposed to do. And I remember in that moment just telling God, I will say yes to this every chance I get, because I know this is what it's all about for me and why I'm here. And so that was really the big changing point, I guess. Yeah. Big marker.
And when the Lord opened that door and you put your yes on the table, told him, I'll do this all day long.
Yeah.
But why the Lord? Why not be Garth Brooks? I mean, I know it doesn't, just because you're chasing country music doesn't mean you're not a believer.
Sure.
But there was a reason you stayed with Christian music. How did the Lord work that out?
That's a great question. Honestly, I just remember having the desire of, I will do anything you tell me to do. If you show me, I'll do it. And I meant it. And I remember even like saying like, if I'm supposed to like go be a missionary or something, like I'm okay with that too. And I really felt that in the moment. But I knew I had this desire to do music but I had that moment of like, if this is not it, I'm okay with that because I now understand whatever you want me to do is going to be the best thing ever.
Yeah.
So I want that. And if it happens to be this music thing, rock and roll, I will run as hard as I can for as long and as far as I can. And so really, I think the Lord just kind of did it. It wasn't anything I was trying to do because it just kept happening and it just kept snowballing. And then even after all these years, it still feels like I'm just hanging on for dear life, just trying to keep rolling. So, and he just keeps doing it.
Well, when your yes is on the table, it's so cool to see what he does do. But you only put your yes on the table if you have learned to trust him, if you've learned that he's worthy, if you love him. And so how did you go from being raised in a Christian home to like, okay, that God that my grandma's singing about, that my mom's playing bass for is my God?
Yeah, I got saved when I was 8 years old. And it was at this little church camp in eastern Kentucky. And I could literally still take you to the tree where it happened. We were actually there a few years ago, and the director of the camp didn't really know that I got saved there. And I said, let's walk out here and I'm going to show you something. And some of the guys in the band actually used to work that camp as well when we were in college. And so we walked through this path, and there's all these little cabins, and I remember taking them straight to the tree. I said, this is the moment in this place. And so, I was 8 years old. I remember my grandpa or my grandma and my mom, maybe my grandpa was with us, I don't remember, but they picked me up from camp that week, and I remember running to tell her, like, I just got saved, And so it was never something where they were pushing me. I just knew in that moment, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I was baptized in a creek up a holler. I mean, that's country, right? Like, and
that's good stuff.
And that's where it happened.
You too, right?
I know. I was in a Baptist church. I'm a Kentucky girl. So I totally, I see where you are. Yeah.
So people are like, are you really that country? I mean, yeah.
Country's cornbread. So when I say to you, Jason Lovins, that you're hanging in there like a hair in a biscuit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Totally get it.
So not from the South.
Yeah.
He understands what it means now.
I'm learning. Y'all are learning me.
First time I said that to him, he was like,
excuse me?
Kind of liked it, though.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It does.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's hard to get that hair out of that biscuit once it's baked in there.
It's true.
What a beautiful thing, though. And now, you say you live in Eastern Kentucky.
Still do, yeah.
So is it in that same region?
Right across the river. I married a Kentucky girl, couldn't get her back to West Virginia, and so I'm smart enough to live where she tells me to live. So we've lived in Kentucky now, since college. So
now, who's your college team?
Kentucky Wildcats. There's
you cannot live in the state.
Yeah, you just.
And do you remember what state Louisville's in?
They say Kentucky, but
I
get
wouldn't know.
confused every time. Every time I ask people that, and usually they go, "What?"
That's good.
Smart. He's good. Yeah. He's good.
He is. Well, you got saved at 8, and growing up in the Christian family, and God has obviously brought music into your life, and you're pursuing that dream. But it can't always be easy. Yeah. I mean, anytime we put our yes on the table, there's an element of we see God show up in some pretty miraculous ways usually, but with that often comes, all right, here's the test. Are you going to trust me for that? And so as God has, allowed you to pursue music and allowed you to, do the desire of your heart, certainly it's not always been easy. So how have you seen him sustain you when times have been hard?
That's a great question. How much time do you have?
Hear the answer on the next Don and Steve Plus.